Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome to Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. I'm your host, January Liddell, and
Helen Edwards.
Welcome to our show. We are so excited to have our recurring and our resident Dr. Gretchen Gavero. She's a mom, wife, entrepreneur, and a board-certified psychiatrist and psychotherapist based in Honolulu, Hawaii. She started her medical journey about 20 years ago and has helped thousands of people improve their mental health, from overcoming simple anxiety and stress to managing severe and chronic conditions. She's an expert at combining the art and science of medicine and psychiatry with practical personal growth tools. Dr. Gavero is also an associate professor of psychiatry who trains other health professionals about compassionate and evidence-based mental health care. She trains other physicians on how to be psychiatrists. She cares for patients in her private practice clinic, Mind Health Space in Honolulu. She shares mental health tips and education online at The Mental Path. She just launched her new online course, The Mental Path Starter, to help people elevate their self-care journey. Gretchen currently lives in Manoa Valley in Oahu, where she enjoys quality time with her husband and her two beautiful children, pursuing creative projects and enjoying the outdoors. Dr. Gretchen, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here again for the fourth time. Thank you.
And Helen, what is the title of our show? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about balanced bliss, self-care, and mental wellness. And Dr. Gretchen Gavero is going to dive a little bit deeper and give us some insight on a well-rounded approach to self-care with the mind, body, and soul, and why focusing on just one is just not enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's start with our mind. So as far as our mind, because our mind is really where it's at. That is the juice of a lot of things. So in your professional opinion, how and what tools can we use in order to help our self-care?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this topic, I think about actually even in my private practice when I take care of patients, how I advise or how I do things in my own life. I always think about two layers of care. There's one that we do in the moment or one that we do on a day-to-day, and then one that's long-term. So for example, when it comes to, since we're talking about the mind, a long-term approach might be really thinking about, are there patterns in our behaviors, our thinking? Are there things that are coming up over and over as far as memories or experiences from the past that are impacting the things that we're doing right now, impacting our decisions, how we behave, those things? And that long-term addressing, we cannot ignore it because it will just continue to do its thing, right? As if we don't address them, if they are limiting us. But then we can't just focus on that because we have to do our day-to-day stuff. For example, I might be talking in therapy or doing some self-work about family stuff or childhood stuff, medical school journey stuff. Yeah. But as I'm doing that, I may be doing that like while I'm journaling or in therapy, I'm still having to do my stuff during the day, like taking care of my kids and then working, taking care of patients. And so I also need to have tools on what to do when things come up in the moment. Let's say a tense conversation, being able to know how to catch when something is catching my attention and causing some stress, and then the tools to kind of go through that. And there's different ones. There's no, other than figuring out how to calm yourself, there's no one rule. Yeah, because each situation is different. So one strategy for a particular situation might be different for another. Should I Oh, go for it.
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
I was going to say if I can go to an example, you know, a simple one might just be like when we're driving to work and I get cut off. Yeah. I That's like early in the morning, right? If I am road raging and giving into that adrenaline, that affects how the rest of my day is going to be. And then, of course, I need to be able to figure out, okay, I already know there's going to be traffic. I cannot control people driving. I should have in my back pocket some tools on how to calm myself down in the moment. It might just be like very quickly thinking, okay, I hope that person is okay. I hope they're safe. Just let it be. Yeah. There's no use me having me like yell in my car because one, they can't hear me anyway, right? And it's just making me drive unsafe. Might be like distracting myself with music or my breathing techniques. Yeah. So that's one example.
So, I know when we're in traffic, a lot of people can get there's road rage, right? And that's what you mentioned. And but it's really hard for some people to go above and beyond that initial feeling. So, in your opinion, like, how can we stop? How can we stop that feeling? And so, in a lack of a better word, for lack of a better
Yes.
phrase, how can we stop that feeling from escalating even more? Because sometimes, anger tends to like continue to grow. So what else can we do?
Yes, the one thing that's really underrated is our breath. And I know that sometimes people might say, "Ah, fine, just give me a breathing technique, all that stuff," and it doesn't work. But if you do it properly, it actually does. It has to. That's what how all our nervous system and our bodies are meant to do. So just taking your deep breath and long extended exhale, and just do that for 5 cycles. That buys you a few minutes. From previous podcasts, we said how once an emotion or an awareness of a thought comes to our awareness, it does all of this physical electrical currents like neurotransmitter action in our body that causes our heart rate to go up, our palms to get sweaty. We start breathing angry, like right? Yeah, so it has a physical, you can see that there's a physical symptom or experience happening. So we just need half a second to catch that and then just go to your breath. Take a deep breath in and then long extended exhale out. You do that about 5 times, 6 times. That buys you about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And we said before that all of that adrenaline action from the moment it spikes up takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes for it to do its thing in our body. Now your hands are going to get hot. You know, you're going to get upset, but then you don't need to do anything. If you are sure you want to yell out in your car, just wait 2 minutes because that yelling out will be much softer.
Yesterday I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and we were talking about our husbands. So her 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 situation is that she's a new mom. So her son is 1 years old, and then so baby, right? So she still has to wake up in the middle of the night, and that was how the conversation started. Was, oh my goodness, you were up at like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Why were you up? And she's like, well, I'm feeding the baby, changing the baby, all of this. But she's also in the service, and military service. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, where's your husband? And then so one of the things that we talked about was when issues arise, with our spouses, sometimes we get really frustrated with them, and then things spiral. And at least, in my case, things have spiraled. And now, the whole mental thing, right? The mindset for me is that if there is some kind of an issue that happens, I give myself a week or 2 weeks. And so from that point on, it kind of inhibits me from me spiraling down even more. So that's kind of the mental, what you were sharing, Dr. Gretchen, is if you at least put that in your mind frame, that breathing exercises for 90 seconds, breathe it for 5 times. That's such a measurable thing. So like for me, like giving myself the allowance of a week to 2 weeks that this is going to be kind of a rough patch. And then after that, it's fine. That kind of gives me, I guess, a sense of relief that this is not forever. It's just a moment. And I think that's what you're sharing, is that if we just took that breath, or just remember to breathe in slowly, and out slowly 5 times, at least for 90 seconds, then it will give us a little bit more of a space between the anger and being calm. Does that sound about right?
Yes, I love your example because it shows how it's different techniques are required for different situation. And so since we're talking about husbands, timely, I'll share my most recent experience because it gives a great example of like just timeline and recognizing patterns. And the main message here is we won't know what you need in a particular situation if you're not taking a pause to reflect. This is why for some people therapy helps because it gives them that space to reflect on these things and think about those. Some for journaling helps, right? You're talking with your bestie helps because it gives you that pause and you're looking at those things. But many people don't take that time. And so I hope the message of take time to reflect and just think about what's happening and what works, what doesn't work, because that's a good starting point to beef up what works and take away what doesn't, right? Now, with my husband now, we've been together, gosh, 24 years, 24 years. That's a long time. And so that's a long time to get data on patterns and anger and all of that stuff. And my husband doesn't mind me sharing this because we're very open about sharing this with people because it helps other people to hear it. He does have anger problems. Yeah. And that stemmed from trauma and childhood stuff and all of those things, in which he has worked, well on. But this when you're upset, the brain defaults to that because it's so familiar and it's so strong, that stamp in our brain. And so last night, a little bit of upset, he's upset. And I know I could see like the story unfolding because we've done this story like 100 times, like the conversations, the questions that come up and everything. And in the moment, I was also like upset, right? And I know that, okay, I can take the bait and give in to my adrenaline. Yeah. I can just like ignore it, you know? And so it kind of lingered on, which was much before we would just like reset very quickly on small things, but this was a little bit bigger. And so it went on up until this morning, right? And so even right before this podcast, I'm thinking, okay, I know that if I let this go on, you know, it's just the day's just going to be sour and, the mind's going to make up more things to be angry about. And so, because I know my pattern and I know my husband's reactions to my pattern, I went ahead and said, okay, got a few minutes before the show. I'm gonna just go up there and then just repair whatever our usual ritual repair is. Quick talk about it, hug, kiss, and then we're all good. Yeah. And because we've practiced that many times, it doesn't just help me; it helps him too. Because in the past, let's say like 10 years ago, man, this argument would last like 2 weeks, with like very intense emotions. And so, because I've spent time to reflect on my pattern, observing his patterns, and also he has done his work too. Yeah. And together as a couple, we do spend time talking about these things. Yeah. Not when one of us are angry, that doesn't work. When we're both calm, especially when we're both like excited about talking about mental health. Yeah. It gets better, over time. So there's hope, in these kinds of like relationship dynamics that are very difficult.
I like what you said about knowing the data, because I feel like the data it fills the gap between us and our external world and the people around us. And I think, since we're, like you said, since we're talking about husbands, it's so true. Those are the people that are closest to us. And you said you took a lot of time to reflect, and It sounds like you have a lot of awareness, which of course, given your expertise, sounds right. But when it comes to the self-care for ourselves, that awareness and that data is so important because it will make our lives better if we do spend that time. I'm gathering we do spend that time to reflect, to be aware, to take observation of other people's patterns, the communication we have with other people, all stemming back to our mind. Our mind is collecting this data, and then that internally is feeding our souls and feeding our bodies the next step forward. Is that what I'm gathering here?
Yes, data is so important because it creates it's a foundation for our patterns. Now, the brain's funny because it just wants easy. It wants to conserve energy. Our body wants to do that, right? Especially our brain. So, in order to conserve energy, it will go into what's familiar because it's easy. It's already encoded. We've done the conversation like 100 times. So, that's why in cases of unresolved trauma or unresolved pain, it becomes difficult because your brain becomes so good at recognizing patterns. So when I see my husband and I could see his facial expression, my head will be like, ah, be careful because this is this is gonna go down, in an argument. And then I start creating, story. And sometimes I'm wrong, you know. Sometimes I misread it, but just because I've had more data of like the fights related to that facial expression.
So I had a conversation with my son yesterday because he and my daughter got into an argument. And I find it so fascinating because there are moments that I don't want to step in and I'll just allow them to just do their thing. They can learn, how to communicate well with each other. Well, at this point, the two of them were really like yelling at each other. And my son really wanted her attention. And she was like, no, nope, I don't want to talk to you. I'm mad at you. And he just kept like asserting himself towards her. So I had to stop. At that point, I just don't want them to be continuing yelling. I wanted to de-escalate the situation. And one of the things that because I talked to both of them separately. And so I talked to my son and I said, when someone is angry, the last thing that you want to do is push yourself, and also tell that person what you think they're thinking. And so he was assuming something about her. And I said, but that's, we can't say for certain that that is how she's feeling. And so for the two of them, they haven't had enough time for data, right, to really figure that out. But for me, as an outsider, looking between the two, I can tell that my son did make a what is it called, an assumption, or he made like a judgment on what he thought she was thinking. And then my daughter, on the other hand, for hers, it was more of, she just did not want to respond, so she shut down. And so it was quite fascinating to see the dynamics between the two. And it's very much like I can see my son as me, because I know way back when Sam and I were dating, that was me. That was like, no, you got to sit here. We got to talk it out. I want to talk things through. And that's my son. So he's very communicative. My daughter is very much like my husband, where she will shut down. And so, yeah, it's very like the whole psychology of it all is so fascinating. And it's nice to be able to see this going on now. Like I felt it was a teachable moment. So we can talk about the mind, really, like where our mind goes. So for my son, it went to, well, she was doing this because she was selfish. I'm like, hold on a second. I don't think that was the case. I think it's this. And for my daughter, she like shut down her body, did not want to talk, and so did not respond to when my son was talking to her and just walked away. And I think I think it's really vital for us to start teaching our young ones, because we are all mothers here, and those of us who are listening may be mothers as well, and fathers who are listening. And, I think it's vital for us to model that type of behavior to our children and to be able to help them discuss and talk. So, at the end of the day, they both apologized to each other. They both hugged, and my son, even though it was really challenging for he and I to have that conversation, because he was really trying to show his point, I was trying to show my point, but at the end we were like, let's actively listen to each other. So it was great practice to do that with my son, and he hugged me at the end of it, and I just hope, I guess my hope is that when he has a girlfriend, when he has a significant other, that he'll be able to communicate in a much better, more calmer way, than how I did when I was younger. But yeah, it's all in the mind. So I don't know if you guys have anything else that you'd
Yes.
like to add, but
I want to add something to that actually, because you pointed like the difference between how your son and daughter responds. It's so significant because each of us have our default ways of managing stress, especially when adrenaline like goes up. My son, my eldest is like your daughter, and I'm like you, January. I want to talk it out. That's why I'm in this. I'm a psychiatrist. So I like, getting things, addressing things right away. But as my son was growing up, let's say he's upset, he would cry, right? And I would go to him and ask him, what's wrong, put it into words. But I noticed after some time, and after like I think I was reading a book or something like that, or doing a course online, and there was a point where some kids, they they're like us, like adults, so they want to talk it out. That adrenaline, remember, adrenaline needs to be released, right? So sometimes you want to like fight it out or tantrum it out. You want to run away, yell, cry, everything. There are some people who the they need to calm down on their own. And so my son is like that. Yeah. He'll cry it out, but it's more stressful when I'm hounding him with questions, right in the moment. So I've learned that he needs time, like a few minutes. And again, the data tells me that he only needs like half an hour, for some things. But in that time, it's important for me to tell him that, okay, you can calm down. Are you okay right now? We'll talk later, or I'm here. Yeah. And allow our kids to soothe, let that adrenaline, like have them take care of that adrenaline on their own, and which is actually good practice, right? As long as it's safe, whatever they're doing. And then eventually we can come, together. And also we have to remember for our kids, I have to remember this for especially my youngest, who's 5. She has a 5-year-old brain, like we said, very little data, right? And very in the moment. So we want to teach our kids and give lessons and everything, but we also need to remember that we're like decades ahead of them, and we can't expect them to like remember, never to be angry. Even as adults, we still slip many times.
okay, so I want to talk about body. So when
Mhm.
we're talking about our body and how, so for me, right, I feel like my mind and my body are sometimes not aligned. So for me, my mind is like, go, 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 like you got this, like so positive, just go. But my body, which is what happened this past May and June, my body was like, nope, you are not allowed to do anything. So I was out of it for May and June. I was lying down, resting, and that's not really who I am, like how my soul and my body, like I'm sorry, my mind, that's not how it's aligned. Like my mind is always like, oh, I gotta do this and this and this and this. Actually, Helen will message me and tell me to go to sleep because I will be up in the middle of the night, and she's like, go to sleep, you're not supposed to, yeah, go rest. And but my body just does not align with that. So for me, I feel like I'm fighting with my mind and my body. They're wanting to do two different things. And so in your professional opinion, how do we align the two?
I love this question. Data seems to be the theme of today, but data comes to mind because your mind and body, actually your brain is part of your body. It's together. So it might seem like aligned, and if it is, it's because maybe our thoughts are, something is up, like there's a stress happening, or there might be like a physical condition that's up, yeah, that's not supporting like our usual flow, of our mind. And so going back to how usually a psychiatrist think would be thinking physiology, psychology, and environment. So back to what we've talked about in the past. So when there's a misalignment that you're thinking, that you're noticing, take an inventory and say, okay, body wise, what's happening here? I can't sleep. I'm feeling restless. I'm feeling tired. List all the physical symptoms and then go to the psychology part. What is my mind, focused on recently? Right? What were there things that I've been stressed out about? Yeah. Um, and then the other thing too is um, think about your external environment. Yeah. So your external environment, then we have to think about, okay, I looked at the data on my body. I looked at the data on my psychology. What's going on around me? Were there other things in my life circumstances or my surroundings, including people, and life events that could be causing this misalignment? And sometimes people, let's say they come to therapy or they do self-help books, right? But then they just focus on that without taking care or paying attention to the body. You cannot separate it because it's like a machine, right? Like you're driving your car, you're the driver, that's the mind, and the body is the car. Yeah, you need to maintain both. Yeah. And so taking care of the body, I think of, again, still like two ways too. There's the long-term maintenance, and then there's the in the moment kind of maintenance. All knowing that your mental state affects your physical state. For example, like we wake up and we want this to be like, oh, I want this to be a really good day, But if you look at our environment, if our schedule is super packed, if we don't stop and rest and eat or sleep, yeah, we're setting ourselves up for a burnout. Yeah. And burnout, as we know, is both physical, like body and mind. And then, so we need to think about on a day to day or on a moment to moment, am I having enough rest just to like maintain my body for the day? And then there's also like the long term thing. That's why I encourage people to make sure, you're doing your regular checkups, whatever provider you go to, that you're getting that done. Kind of like a car needs like an oil change, because we age, right? Especially for women. Like, and right now I'm in that space where I'm perimenopausal. So I'm having all kinds of hormonal changes. And that, even just that, we know that that's a physical condition, but it has such a direct impact on your mood and stress management, anxiety.
Absolutely agree. I'm going through a similar situation right now. And these aren't things that I was really taught about when I was younger. I think my mom did the best she could. But again, the science of research for women going into perimenopause, premenopause, and menopause is just, it's not fully in effect like it is for men. So we're still learning, and I'm still learning. Again, going back to the data, trying to collect data, trying to do my checklist, check my inventory. And I was thinking about this actually when I first learned that we were going to do this subject about self-care. I love self-care. I love self-love. But one of my issues is I tend to know I need to do a certain something for myself, but I will put that on the back end of my to-do list because I'm so driven and so ambitious to move forward in obtaining goals, which are basically I'm fishing for external external gratification, right? That I'm letting my internal world kind of not suffer, but I'm not putting it as a priority. And I think that may stem from my upbringing, how we learned through just, my parents and learned through the church and learned through growing up that we put everybody else above us. We put everybody before us because that is the right thing to do. That's the godly thing to do. And so self-love and self-care got introduced as a good thing in my life later on. So I realized I'm still wired in a way which I still put myself on the back burner. And so what is a way that I can start rewiring that within myself?
I love this. And when we're talking about, when I was preparing for this and thinking about the soul part, like that's what's like coming to me, right now. Yeah. And the And I work with so many people like us who want to achieve and goal driven, all of those things, and are such givers, and caregivers. We have families to take care of. The one thing I remind myself and other people, including my family, is that yes, it feels good to give, and maybe that's like part of our value or really a core part of our identity. Like for me as a mom, that's one of my favorite things to do. But in order for me to be the best giver that I can be, really, is I have to be okay. I have to be good. I have to I have to feel like I'm not I have enough for myself. Because when you do that overflow, then you'll have infinite things to give to others if that's really, what you're into. Yeah. Like if it, as a doctor, for example, if I am a burnt out doctor, I wouldn't want to go to me as a patient, right? I because then it's kind of I wouldn't believe what I would say. So the walking the talk part is so important. When we care for the people we love, like our children, we tell them, take care of yourself, rest, eat good foods. We should be doing that on our own too. Yeah. And that part I think is self-care. So, and the other part is the the feeding your soul part. Now, um, lately I've been having a lot of conversations about how we tend to lose ourselves in our relationships. Like when you're dating for the first time or long-term relationships, right? All of a sudden, when let's say a breakup happens, it's unsettling because it's hard to remember how it was like to be on your own. Um, but then if you think about it, the reason that those two people got attracted is because you were doing your own stuff and you were feeding your soul. So I think we have to, again, take time to sit and remember, like write down on paper, what were some of the things that really feeds my soul? And it doesn't have to be grand things. It can be like something that's super simple. For my husband, for example, I know it's music, hands down. Yeah, it's like in his bones, to the point where I know that if we have a fight, once he goes to his drum lessons, I know we'll be good right after. Yeah. Just because it's that powerful. Yeah. And so for me, it's like I love personal development. I love to read. I love running. So those small things, I got to make sure that I'm putting that sometime in the week, in my schedule. And here's the main thing, not feel guilty for advocating for the time to do that or even the resources to do that. If I have to spend some money buying a course that I'm really into or starting a business, if my heart is really there, and I know that that's my calling is there, don't feel guilty doing that. You have to strategize and plan for it. And then know that in your heart, like that makes you a better person. It makes you happy. And when you're happy, and everyone else around you, is happy. Like just think about our families, right? The people or whoever you live with. If each of the people in that house is taking care of themselves, the dynamic as a unit just becomes better. And then you just like things you pay attention more to the joyful things. And then when stress happens, we're more resilient in managing the stress because the brain keeps tab of like what's painful and what's pleasurable, right? And then if we're always just focused on when the next shoe is going to drop, when the next stress is going to happen, yeah, that's the part of the brain that's like being exercised, becomes familiar, becomes easy, it becomes the default. But then when we're pretty happy, the people around us are pretty happy, they're all taking care of themselves. And then for the most part, like that's allowing us to take in the good in our experiences. Then we're exercising the other parts of the brain that sees that and takes that in. Now, imagine that if that's your default. I think for mental health providers, or I'll speak for myself, for me, that's one advantage that I have because I talk about hope all day long and strategies all day long to the point where when something is happening to me, I remember what I would say someone, and then it's just easier, times 10 years, 10 plus years of doing these things. But you don't have to be a psychiatrist to do that, but you do need to spend time, to think about it and plan for it.
One of the things that you said that really got to me was the guilt part. Because I think for a lot of us, I know for me, I feel guilty if I take a break. I feel guilty if I just sit down and not do anything and just watch something. I feel guilty, for giving me the time. But I now am seeing how vital it is for me to take care of myself. And that means really listening and being attuned to my body, to my mind, to my soul, and where it's at. And one of the things the other things that I like that you said was how your husband loves music and how that's his go-to, And, for me, it's so important to find joy daily. And I feel like if I don't have joy daily, then I'm not doing it right. I feel like I'm not feeding myself, my body, my mind, my soul, right? If I don't find joy. So it's vital for me that I step back and I remember who I was like before I had children, before, Gretchen, when we were in college, right? When we were in college, we had the time of our lives where everything just seemed so bright and cheery, and we just did whatever we wanted when we were younger. And I'm beginning to realize that it's important to do that now, even as a mom, a wife, a friend, a sister, an auntie. It's so important to do that because I'll lose myself. And you mentioned that earlier, you're going to we lose ourselves in relationships. But that can not just mean your husband or your boyfriend, but it's also your friends, your children, and I remember like crying at one point because I'm like, who am I, um, and lately I've been looking at my pictures like when I was younger. I'm like, yeah, I remember this girl. I remember that I loved lying down on the grass and just looking at this, thinking like all these great things about the clouds, and just little things that just give me joy, So you're right. It's so important to not feel guilty and know that this is important for your whole family.
Yeah, sometimes we're better when we think about other people. So think about when you're starting to feel that guilt, think about, okay, if this was my husband or my best friend, yeah, going through some things, what would I tell them? I'll tell them to take a break. I'll tell them not to burn out. I'll tell them to make holes in their schedule. And then you flip that towards you. And again, we got to walk the talk, right? Yeah. Our message is more powerful when we're doing that. And another thing, when you said about, remembering how we were when the things that you enjoy, I read a few months ago, I read a book, and it said something like our brain remembers like the joyful things that we did mostly up until we're like 8 years old. So think about what were some of the things that you truly enjoyed back then. And to me, it's like coloring and daydreaming, those things. And it makes sense because I love like autograph books. And it makes sense that I love journaling now and writing now because that's what my mind was hooked into before. So that could be a starting point because there are people, believe it or not, when we ask them, what are things that you used to like to do? And they cannot remember, or they don't know because the mind is so focused on the distress, right? And so I would ask you, when you were younger, what was that? Now, it also reminds us that our raising our kids now, it's important when they're young, giving them these like experiences. And last thing about college, when you said, right? Yeah, it's bright and cheerful. Like notice how that's what you remember, but also college was also hard. Yeah, I loved college. Like it's like one of my favorite parts in my life. Yes, it was like so many wonderful things, and that's what I focus on when I think about it. But if I really spend an extra few seconds, it was so hard. Yeah, it was hard trying to get through the big classes and all of those things and friendships. Yeah. Um, but again, depending on what you exercise in your brain, you can have a lens of like looking at, okay, I can't do anything about the past, but I can focus on what were some of the helpful things that I can remember about it now.
Mm. When you were talking about remember who you were before you met your partner, and that's what attracted you to each other. I literally felt like just a dose of serotonin got released in my body because I had all these fuzzy and warm feelings. Because my life, I tell my husband often, I was happy before I met you. The goal is for us to combine and make us more happy, because it was I danced, I laughed, traveled, and you're right. Now I work from home and I can get in this routine of just wearing sweats every day, just working from home, and I'm never dressed up, and I'm just like in my sweats. I get in my sweats after I work out and take a shower. I'm like, one of my goals was to start dressing nicer and dress like as if I'm going to meetings all the time. Voila, exhibit A. Okay. Even in the podcast, you can tell I look different today. And I want to feel good. I want to look good. I want to give him something good to look at and be proud of, even though it's just in the comfort of our own home. But I love how you just reminded me of all these things. And one of the things that I often talk about is a famous quote you probably have both heard is that you were once wild, don't let them tame you. And that's always in the back of my mind. So I really do put in the effort to try to do things I still love to do, like try to get out of the house. And one of those things is investing in tickets to shows or gatherings. So that way I can't say no. It's like, okay, I already put my money on it. I gotta go. And then I end up having like the best time ever. But you're right. Part of self-care is the remembering and allowing, like what just happened to me, that serotonin to be released and these joys and these memories coming back in and flooding myself. I just practiced self-care, and it's not hard. And I think part of me and many of us, we make it hard for ourselves because we get in our own way. Would you agree with that?
I agree. So we get it in our own way psychologically, like the guilt, right? Or even for the most part, I think we all want to be happy, healthy, and successful and in different areas like career and relationships. But even if you just look at this definition of success, like we have to reflect on that, because that doesn't mean always being busy. Productive doesn't mean you're like
Think
working 50 hours a week, like every single week without sleep. It's actually not good, right? So but the cool thing is our brain, we are in charge of how you think about things and the meaning that you put into things. So I remind myself that resting actually is very productive. It's an essential part of your productivity toolkit because it recharges you. So if we think of the body down, so adrenaline goes up because all that's you're gonna crash. You cannot bypass that going down, but you can have a smooth landing, which is what's ideal. So that's why we have breaks. We need to take our breaks. And then every few weeks, you want your extended vacation, right? Because you need like a large reset and recharge after like a big project. Yeah. So that's the psychology part and the body part. But then there's also, I guess, part of psychology is the time. We need to be very good at and very honest about really looking at our time. We can say, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to journal, all that stuff. But really, when are you going to do that? Like many people say, I want to meditate, even if it's just like 2 minutes, but then 2 months later, we're not doing it. And that's okay. But you have to know that you have to take that pit stop and say, okay, what happened? What can I adjust? And how can I rearrange, my schedule to make it happen?
So I appreciate that you're talking about time, like there's a time frame. So when I um it was one of the hardest things to go through because not only was it painful, and just a little, this is how painful it was. I went to the ER, they gave me fentanyl, and I said, I still feel it. They gave me another dose of fentanyl. I'm like, no, I still feel it. And so they gave me Toradol. I'm like, I guess, but I still feel it. So for me, resting was such uncomfortable thing to do. And it was so uncomfortable because my calendar is pretty much like prior to May, my calendar was booked solid. I had meetings like left and right, and I would fill my calendar. Um, but since that time, because there was a moment where I was a little bit scared when they told me that there was a free flowing liquid in my system. And when I saw that, and when the doctor told me, I'm like, I just thought the worst. I thought, oh my gosh, this could lead to sepsis. This could lead to possible death. You and I feel like during that moment of my my mortality was in question, then I start thinking, what did I do? Like, what did I do in my life? And did I fulfill everything that I needed to fulfill? And was I in joy? Um, I was just listening to somebody say that their dad, up until their death, was emailing whoever his clients are or whatever. And she was like, and then he passed away shortly after that. And she was like, for what? For what? And so I think a lot of the times we get so wrapped up in our lives and in all of our things to do list, that it's easier for us to take care of all of our check marks and boxes. And we don't put ourselves as one of those check boxes. We're not in that box. In fact, I'm living proof. I have a blocked time for myself from 12:30 to 1:30. And what do? I negate that time and I give it to somebody else. And I believe I'm not the only one that has done that. And what Dr. Gretchen was talking about was putting the time and making the decision to put that time in for you. Because, as we all know, if you're not good, then everyone else around you will also not be good. And they'll also feel the effects of you not feeling, 100%. And I know for me, that was me. And so fast forward now, I feel good about working when I feel inspired to work. I feel good about taking a break. I feel good about just giving myself that time and that space to, just be joyful and just be me, for that moment in time. And it's a daily thing. It's a decision that I made for myself after what happened, because I feel like stress was also a culprit in why I was experiencing what I experienced. And I know in Japan, there are multiple people who passed away because of their stress and their overworking themselves. And I think that's a physiological thing that happens too. I'm not a doctor. What do you think, Dr. Gretchen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even when we think about cardiovascular health, so blood pressure issues, that's directly related to stress levels, amongst other things, right? Like food, nutrition, all those things. But stress has a lot to do with that. And so and it's not just we don't manage stress, our blood pressure goes high. Yes, that happens. But what happens after, blood pressure goes high? You increase the risk of stroke and heart attack and other things, right? So this is why you cannot separate really your mind and if you want to be healthy, you have to really take care of both body and mind, right? And for your body and mind for your mind to feel inspired, you said you want to be inspired to go to work. That means you have to make sure you know what feeds your soul. Right? You know what's important to you. One of the things I've shared with many people is I have a notebook that has a list of the different roles that I play in my life. And there's like 7 or so. So I think it goes in this order. Like I'm mom, wife, daughter, sister, friend, psychiatrist, business owner, online educator. And then, it goes, so that's like 8. Yeah. And then that's plenty, right? And for each of those, I write down like really everything. If there's no lack of resources, no lack of time, like what are ways of being that I want to be? And what are the things that I want to accomplish in those roles in my lifetime? And just writing it out, it's so inspiring. I started doing this about 5 years ago. And then every 6 months or every few months or so, maybe every quarter, definitely at least twice a year, I look at that notebook, especially when I'm up against a big decision. So when I transitioned from my university work to full on private practice, or when I decided to launch my online program, um, I looked at that and because I was unsettled and I wasn't I was confused about a lot of things. But once I went back to that book, you know, and I looked at that, it reminded me of my biggest goals, my values, ways of being I want to be. Then the inspiration comes, and with that too, I'm very honest about, okay, well, part of that is I also want to be like a healthy person. So that's there too. That's why I can't, there's no excuse. I know exactly the things that I need to work on, to do that. And so it helps because when we're stressed, our brains are tired. It doesn't want to think about those things. But then when you look at it, you look at that notebook, you have a starting point. Yeah. Then you can grow. Um, last thing, or another thing, going back to what Helen said earlier about what we used to enjoy prior our relationships. And that could be like, for me, that was like 20 years ago, right? So I was like in my 20s. So that's so different. But then if you think about it now, I have 20 years more data, um, more resources. And my husband and I talk about this all the time. We talk about how, yeah, we used to enjoy like going out, sure, camping, maybe going to Disneyland. We used to enjoy back in the days, and we still do. And so we make sure we do that. But then now we have more resources, and that joy we can bring back, but we can like multiply it because we can stay an extra day or something because we have a little bit more savings.
What brought to mind was my inner child. And my inner child for me is it's important to nurture her and to think about her, because I feel that, I don't know, I think as I get older, as I get older, there's a lot more negativity and cynicism and a lot of other stressors in life that can, that can really bring us down. And we can be stuck in that hole if we choose to be stuck in that hole. And when I look back on my childhood, I had a great childhood. I mean, it wasn't perfect by any means, but I did have a good childhood. My parents, taught us how to travel. And they gave us the inspiration and the love of traveling and exploring the world. You know, um, we didn't have a lot of money, but we did enjoy traveling when we were able to. And I think just bringing that inner childhood and remembering, that moment, I think makes life a little bit less stressful for me. And it makes things a little bit more brighter. And, I do have children. And so having that inner child along with my children kind of, it makes this really nice, like synergetic energy. I can't explain how it is, but I think when we are able to bring that out, at least for me, that helps me, and it helps me like not take life so seriously, because it's so easy to be like, I got bills, I got this, I got, responsibilities, clients, like the list can go on, and it can be really overwhelming, to think about all of our responsibilities. As adults, we have so much responsibilities, but I think to at least nurture that inner child and to bring her out just to have fun and just to play, for me, makes life worth living, or it's a little bit more lighter when my inner child is nurtured. I don't know how you feel about that, Dr. Gretchen, but what are your thoughts? And is that something that you talk with your clients about?
Oh, all the time, because a lot of the ways that we see the world right now, or how we are right now in this present moment, it stems from back in the days. It stems from the beginning. And if you think of the brain, that's when the brain is absorbing a lot of information, bookmarking a lot of experiences, a lot of patterns, models that are being learned. So many of those stem from childhood. Yeah. But we also can ignore that our brains it's a sponge. And so as we grow, we pick up experiences. And as we get older with more responsibilities, we become more aware of the things that just to kind of note. That's why like adults are more up for comparing themselves to other people than kids are. Kids are just like, I'm just focused on myself, right? Because we're looking at all of this data, and yeah, some of that is necessary when it comes to like, just like being in society and everything. But we have to be careful about that because we lose our inner child when we do that, right? We forget how it's like when it's just, well, what makes me happy, not what makes the other person happy, or just because they're happy doing this, I should do that. Yeah. Um, and then when we one might say, well, how do I do that, or how do I start, or how do I even start self-care, right? If it's so overwhelming to think about it, because we've talked about so many things just in this show, just for today, um, when you're overwhelmed thinking about it, when you're like stressed out, like feeling stressed about it, just look at your calendar. You can start there. There's no emotions, it's just data, just what's on your calendar. And just be honest, plug in that time and make it fun, make it a challenge for you to honor that 12:30 to 1:30 time, how many days a week, and then have a backup. If you know that you're likely not going to honor it, maybe 1 hour is too much. Maybe it has to be broken up in like 30 minutes, like different times. I have to do that. Like, and I struggle with that like every week because people are calling me for visits, appointments, especially I just came from vacation. So people are like waiting, to get back to sessions. But it's so tempting to fill up that day. But I know that by 2 o'clock, if I'm back to back to back, I can't do it. And it's not good, not just for me, but it's not good for my patients. Right? They're getting just a percentage of my attention, when I'm not rested. And then even worse for my family at the end of the day when I'm going back and like being with them. Yeah. And then I'm not as excited the next day because I'm tired, right? So there's a cycle. I think it brings like a nice summary to everything that we talked about. Like there's spend time to take 30 minutes to just think about these things. Like have 3 columns: body, mind, and soul. Brainstorm what's a day to day or in the moment kind of thing that I have to do or strive to do. And then what's like a longer term thing that I should keep in mind and schedule in my calendar to do, like your doctor's appointment, or you're going through that self-help book to understand your childhood, whatever that is. And then think about, like, try to remember that hobby that just makes you happy, even if it means you're watching Netflix. If that's like, if that feeds your soul, like if that one show just feeds your soul, like for my husband and I, like Game of Thrones was like, it's like a bonding moment for us because we talk about it and we analyze, if that's it for that season, don't feel guilty, spend time, just strategize.
Gosh, I love the tools that you just shared with us. The 3 columns, I'm definitely going to be doing that on a daily: mind, body, soul. I like that you gently nudged me to maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's less than that, but at least to give myself something. I think that was great. And then the show, for you, it's Game of Thrones. For me, it's my Korean drama. I love my Korean drama. It's great. Yeah, anyway, so it's great. It's great to watch and just kind of just be still, even just for a moment. So, Dr. Gretchen, thank you so much. You have inspired us, enlightened us, and just reminded us of how important it is to really do our mind, body, and self-care, either daily or weekly for sure. So we're reminded like who we are, and just we'll be better people, better persons to our loved ones if we do the work. And we can show up much better for them. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, all right. Well, I guess we'll leave it on that.
Taking it in.
I also want to say thank you. You have given us a lot of great tips as always. I love re-listening to these episodes and just going, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. And audience out there, please share this. If this is something like for me, or release of serotonin, this episode will do that for you. So any last words? Where can they find you, Gretchen? Anything coming up? Please let our audience know.
Yes, last words would be, as far as strategies, just start with one thing. And for self-care, I say you're probably doing it daily. Yeah, so give yourself credit for what you're doing already. And then beef it up. add one thing each day and don't feel guilty about it. My online course is going to be relaunching at the end of July. And so there's lots of revisions happening from the initial course. And I'm also working on an app, which is going to be coming up hopefully soon. And it'll have like organized reels from what I post on Instagram and a little bit about my course. So I'm excited about that. And I'm on Instagram at _mental_path. And you can also email me at info@thementalpath.com.
Helen, where can we find you?
I'm excited about your app. All right, you can find me Hell of a Journey with one L or on Sexy Freedom Media. Instagram, you can Google me. I'll pop right up. I am a financial strategist and I am also an author of Nothing Sexier Than Freedom. I'm currently writing the sequel, so follow my journey. And you can always check out our morning show, which is Your Morning Sauce. All of the episodes are under 6 minutes, and I'm sure you're going to love it because Dr. Gretchen and January do. All right, January, where can they find you?
I also love the app. I'm really excited about that. And just to verify, it's _mental_path. And I'm excited about your new revisions. Thank you so much for doing that. And for those that are just listening to this, the mental path was actually inspired by The Mandalorian. And so if you're a Star Wars fan like I am, it's great. I do love this this online course. You can find me January Liddell on LinkedIn. On Facebook, I'm Anchored Financial LLC. Also on Instagram, Anchored Financial LLC. You can find my book, Alina the Super Saver, on Amazon, and it's a children's book about financial literacy. It's a very exciting book. I'm so happy to share that with you all. And that is where you can find us. Otherwise, Gretchen is our resident doctor. And so she will be here again in the next quarter, the next 4 months or so. We're looking forward to our next episode with you, Gretchen. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Aloha,
everybody.
everyone.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.